In these times of uncertainty, it's all the more important that we keep collaborating, informing, and inspiring each other, so that we can be smarter and better tomorrow. Welcome to the Pakhuis de Zwijger livecast.
A very warm welcome to you from Pakhuis de Zwijger. My name is Jurgen Chonnefong and I will be your moderator for the 7th edition of It's All Graphic, a program developed in collaboration with the Wim Krauwel Institute. Well, as we all know, these are crazy times. The Netherlands was, like many other countries in the world, in what we call a smart lockdown. Yesterday, finally, a route map was announced by the government to release us. At least that's how it feels. In the past weeks, people in vital professions like healthcare workers, the police and the fire department, but also food supply workers, were the ones that kept the society running. In this online edition of It's All Graphic, we will research how graphic design can play a vital role now and in the near future. In addition, we will focus on what graphic design can do in times of crisis, like the crisis we're facing right now. And what's the function of strong graphic design or graphic identity as well? And what's the importance of communication in wayfinding in our 1.5 meter society? If you join us through Zoom, there's a possibility to ask questions to our panel. Please use the Q&A button for that. And if you would like to talk amongst each other, you can also use the chat function for that as well. But first, let's welcome our first studio guest. He's a brand strategist for Grr, and I'm very happy he's here. Roel Stavronis, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
How have you been holding up the past couple of weeks?
It was exciting. It was strange. I live in Breda, which is sort of the center of Corona. And I live together with my wife, and she's in healthcare because she's a midwife. So our lives changed around quite a lot.
Was it a scary time? Because that was the epicenter almost of Corona. So was it scary to, was there a fright to get the infection? Or?
I think it was a little bit of a shock that something like that, a lockdown, could happen to us all. I think we were maybe in the south a little bit more aware that things were happening. I live quite near the Amphia Hospital. It was very dynamic over there. Things were going crazy, and that was something that we talked around the table because my wife walks in the hospital every day. So we were quite aware that something bad was happening.
But you're all healthy and safe.
Yes.
Great to hear that.
Yeah.
We have to talk about graphic design today, which is very nice, and I'm happy to do that because you can say that the role of graphic design under pressure of the Corona crisis changed a lot. Or hasn't it fundamentally?
Well, I've been thinking about that, and I get a lot of samples of things that I saw happening in design at all. So not necessarily graphic design, but also product design, etc. And I think there's a lot of spontaneous initiatives that rise, which is very interesting. I think that what I'm thinking about is the importance of graphic design. Also, we were just talking about the spontaneous interventions that people do to divide people in stores, and they just use tape and make their own symbols to make sure what the dynamic should be in such an environment. The picture that you see here is I think is brilliant. It's a spontaneous intervention in a hospital. Because of the mask, you don't recognize the people anymore, and you want to see who you're dealing with. And that's something not done by designers, probably. And I think that's very interesting. So it's a little bit of a world of spontaneous interventions by normal people using graphic design.
Right.
And graphic designers responding to that in a more professional way.
But also graphic design agencies have to respond in a very direct way as well to deal with the crisis, to have the importance of graphic design almost in instilling trust in the organizations they represent through the graphic design. You brought an example about that, about Gor.
Gor, just before Corona came to us, we were working with the identity of Gor, and Gor is the organization that is responsible for the continuity of healthcare. So if an accident happens, a building explodes, the GOR comes from underneath the GGD, health service, and they are responsible of directing everything that's happening in the hospitals and in the home cares. So it's a very important role. I also brought a slide where you can see how divided the landscape is and how also organizations within the Netherlands are divided on the one hand, and also
because these were part of all the same organization, but they all carried their own logo.
It's totally different from, for instance, the police, which is one organization in the Netherlands. The GOR has got their regional departments, and they can decide themselves how they give shape to their identity.
Yeah.
And what you can see here is that they sometimes take it quite seriously, sometimes they don't. But this doesn't show one organization that sort of takes control.
Yeah, I can imagine that for a graphic design bureau, it's very interesting to have almost an umbrella, to have one logo that communicates, clarity.
Yeah.
But what I also can imagine is that for regional organizations, to protect their own identity and to combine that with their own logo can be very important as well. How do you deal with those sensitivities? Because they don't want to be part of this bigger entity. They have their own identity.
Yeah. Well, I think that's exactly the struggle that you have to go through. I mean, that's a very fair point of view. But in the end, it's all about what are you there for? What is your task in life, in your professional life? And what does that mean for the clarity of your identity? And I think that most design firms listen very carefully to all stakeholders and also internally, and try to find the good balance between how does it represent to the outside world and how does it make the people working within the organizations feel that they can distinct themselves in a way.
And how can you make people stakeholder of that new identity? How do you involve them or make them part of it?
Well, exactly by doing that, involve them in the process. Take them with you in the journey that you're going on, and make very clear why you're doing this, so they understand the relevance. At the end, if you develop an identity that they don't want to embrace, that they don't want to carry, then you're bound to develop something which is useless.
But in the end, you have to deal with opposing views. And if you design something that's a result of compromise, it's never that strong. So how do you deal with those opposing views, and how do you avoid, the ultimate compromise?
Well, I think you connect opposing views to compromise. I think it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily need to end up in compromise. I think if you do your process properly, if you involve people in the right way and you take them with you, not everyone might understand or agree, but I think then still you can make something quite forceful. I think we'll be talking to Tom in a few moments.
Yeah.
He'll probably say something about it. I think the Dutch identity for the police is not a compromise at all, where also there you've got many stakeholders.
True. We will talk with Tom Dorrestein in a minute as well to talk about the corporate identity of the police that transferred from regional to national. But we'll talk about that in a moment, because you brought some other examples where you can illustrate that the process that the design bureaus, or the challenges that design bureaus have to face as well. The first example that you brought with you is the need for creation for a design bureau, but you have to work in a certain kind of context as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
What do you mean by the initiatives that develop very quickly? Like we just saw Oak. I think it's done by Johnson Banks in the United Kingdom. Yeah. I think that's been done over, I think maybe a weekend, a couple of days. And also at GRU we did a project which is called Hulptroepen, a collaboration between Coolblue, KLM, and also GRU. And also something we did within a weekend. And because you've got this urgency, people don't get distracted by a lot of other things that are normally important, like process and decision making, etc.
Can you say something about quality? Because what you showed here, it has been developed in a weekend. Gru has done that as well. Is this of lesser quality than something that you designed in a 6-month period of time?
No, I think the quality in the end is in the relevance. So Oak National Academy is some sort of educational platform that just was needed because of the lockdown. So people gathered and developed something very quickly.
Yeah.
The relevance make the quality. And I can imagine that they tweak things throughout time. So in the end, it's all about relevance. Also, all those spontaneous interventions that you see with the tape not done by professionals, if they work, people understand it. People divide and take their 1.5 meters distance. Yeah, it's fine.
But now, actually, in the past minute, you placed a bomb on the whole system that has been used by graphic design bureaus, where they need the time for a process. You can do the same thing in a weekend, or you could leave it at the people themselves, give them a piece of tape, and then they'll resolve it themselves. So isn't that like don't you, aren't you afraid that the relevance of design bureaus with that train of thought has disappeared?
No, I think that design agencies have got the task to work with the context. If you've got time, if you can do things properly, organize decision making in a different way, maybe that's sometimes a good idea. But maybe also this period of time tells us that sometimes it's more constructive or relevant to do something very quickly together, and it's very agile. I mean, that's what we are all talking about the last couple of years. Work agile. This is agile to the max.
But is it a form that can be used in future as well?
Yeah.
But also, without a crisis, I mean.
Yeah, but also I think that depends on what clients want, in a sense of you can't ask from your teams to work every weekend to do something very quickly. So also customers need to be able to sort of show that urgency and be able to pay for that effort, because it should cost something.
Because the work that has been done in a weekend is just as much as that has been done in 6 months.
Yeah, and that's the same like on the ICs in the hospitals. That's something for a couple of weeks, but you can't maintain that throughout the next couple of years, because then you wear everyone out. And that's the same with these projects that you do in a weekend.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the interaction between product design and graphic designers? Because that resulted in some beautiful things as well in the past couple of weeks.
We're talking about graphic design, but I think that all those disciplines are connecting together much more every day. You see platforms. For instance, you've got the hand sanitizer here. It's a product done by, for instance, Bavaria. It's scary to think that they can change around their beer brewing process instantly to make hand sanitizer. Think about that. But you also need packaging.
Why is that scary though? That's agile as well.
Yeah, because you connect two things that you don't want to connect together. Hand sanitizer you put on your hands is 70%, and the other thing is something you consume. They are different worlds. Normally, if you've got the time to think about it, you probably say, well, this is a very bad idea. We shouldn't get involved with that. But now, because of urgency, because of relevance, because of the need, you get combinations that are very interesting.
But how does the collaboration between the product designers and graphic design can reinforce each other?
I think what I see is that a lot of design agencies connect from different kinds. So product designers, digital designers, graphic designers. And they think much more holistic about the problems that organizations have, or the challenges that organizations have. So they are more connected anyway, and I think that is the future. I think it's not very likely to me that in 10 years time you will have a design agency that will just do graphic design. I think it will be mixtures. And I think those design agencies will be talking to the people in charge of the organization, so higher in the hierarchy.
Yeah. So there will be involved earlier in the process.
I think so.
In order to join the forces of graphic and product design.
Yeah.
So that there's a holistic point of view where graphic design isn't just designing the label for the end product, but is involved in the whole process.
Yeah, where I think that in the end they can play a more fundamental role for those organizations and for themselves.
Right. Thank you for now. We will return to you as well. But first, like we already announced, I would like to go to our first guest who will join us through Zoom. That is Tom Dorrestein. And he is part of Studio Donbar, a strategy director. And I'm very happy you're here. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, nice to meet you, Jürgen.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you as well, because these are very strange times. And like I said at the beginning, we are looking into the changing ways of the changing roles of designers in our near future. But to look forward, we have to look back a little bit, because you've been involved with the corporate of the new identity of the national police. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm afraid even more than a little bit, but just one thing. I live in the center of Haarlem, so if there's a Harley Davidson driving by or a truck, it might be a bit noisy. But
please pick up your computer, go to the window and show us which one it is.
I'll be too late, I'm afraid. There are two things about like if you look at the process and the history of the police. I think the most important marking point is, I think it's 19, 20 years ago, there was a merger between the regional police and the municipality police. And they needed to become regional organization. That was really a merger that I didn't appreciate in the organization.
Yeah, nobody was waiting to be part of the national police. They all liked their regional identity.
Yeah, well, it's two stages. At that stage, you still had regional police, but regional and municipality police was the merger. Now, just some years ago, it was all the regional forces merged into one national police. Mm-hmm. It's a two-stage model, but the initial one was this merger that the police in municipalities and regional in the provinces lost their independence, lost their identity, their visual identity, and needed to have a new identity. That's where it all starts, actually, with a new identity that is still around.
Yeah. And how did you go about? Because what, for example, were the 3 requirements that your design had to meet for, to design an identity for a vital organization like the police?
Well, the interesting thing is that 20 years ago, things did work a bit differently. I think if you now look to explain why is this striping such a success, and maybe it's strange to say of your own work it's success, but I think everyone knows, like it's known around the world, is especially the striping of the police. It's been proudly chosen by the Dutch people in a poll of NRC Next as a very popular one of the top 25 design items that in the history of Holland. But at that time, it did work differently. Roel was just explaining about stakeholder management. Well, in this case, there was, of course, a kind of stakeholder management with the decisive persons in charge of this identity and led by the Ministry of, and the Home Office, Ministry of Domestic Affairs. But like I said, when the identity, especially the logo, was published, the people in the organization, they really deeply hated it. They really couldn't stand it.
Because we see an example now, because they came from the 8-pointed star, and that was, brought back very graphically for the police, at least, to have the word police incorporated to it, and like it's almost a stamp with a flame on it. And that wasn't received very well at that time.
No, but you can see it even like, and if you see the shapes, it's like a double nuclear bomb that you do, because on one hand, it's a more, let's say, it's a bit more, it has more machismo than a regular fashion company, I could say, like a police organization, which is logical.
But what was the idea? What was the thought behind the new strategy? What was the thought behind this new design?
The thought behind the design was to go away from this heraldic symbolism and to make it more a civil symbolism. So to bring it closer to the people, because you're not only the safeguarding, and it's not only about your monopoly on aggression, what you have as an army or as police. It was also meant to be a much more accessible and much more close to the people.
And
So
was history or nostalgia, which was part of that logo, the old logo as well, was that part in your design thinking as well, or not?
No, we stepped away from it dramatically, and that's also what made it so difficult for internally and externally, because externally it wasn't appreciated either in the beginning. We're talking about the logo now. Internally, people hated it because they lost this heraldic symbol, and the new logo was also the symbol for a merger that no one wanted internally. So that's why I didn't win the popularity contest at that time. Externally, people didn't understand anything about this whole change, this whole strategy to make it more civil. And people looked at it like, they found it weird. They called it the burning tosti. So I'm.
What was the tipping point at that? What was the tipping point that people started to appreciate it?
I think both internally and externally, it started with striping, because ironically, this was the only part in the police organization that they didn't need to adopt. Every section was free to have their own design of the cars and other elements of the fleet. But we designed one proposal as like, you can use it if you want to. And that's the striping as it is now. It was voluntarily. And that's exactly what I think really drove the merger into the organization, because everyone was nearly fighting at the stage to have their fleet turned into the new striping. And I think also to the general public, in a subconscious way, they really appreciated the clarity and the quality of the striping. I think that it made it work internally and externally.
And how did you go about by giving a certain kind of freedom where they could apply the striping themselves? Can you give an example of how that worked?
No, there is no freedom at all in how you apply it. But at that time, you were free not to apply it at all. There were different cars and different colors in each region, and they were free to keep it. But if you go for the striping, there is no freedom. Then it was really, it needs to be to the detail. It needs to be right.
And like you said, it's very appreciated. What aspect of the design is appreciated? Is it the clarity that you mentioned, or is it something else?
I think it's I never speak of design as something magic, because here also you start with a pile of functionality demands that is really, really, really big. And I think you should talk in a very normal way about things like design. But sometimes something happens that you can't really explain to the detail. And sometimes you just touch the heart in a way that you can never reason before, or you can never decide before to do it. You always try to make the most amazing stuff that you can. But even sometimes when you are ecstatically happy about what you have designed, the feedback from the audience might be less. And sometimes, so you never know beforehand. And in this case, it just happened. And I think there was a big relief to have something that looks so popular. Mm-hmm. It looks so sharp. It looks colorful. But yet it's also really serious. It's for a police organization, and it fits them. So it was an extreme modernization of a police force, like never shown before, and I think even after. But you could see that it was not just for making a nice design statement. And I think that's very relevant. Things can be really great design, and they should be, but it shouldn't be designed because you want to make a point in your image. And I think that's exactly the sweet spot. The striping is touching. It's extremely well designed. People appreciate the looks, but it's not for looks only. It really has a reason. every detail of it.
We will talk a little bit more about that, but first I would like to remind the audience that there's still an opportunity to pose your questions to the panel through our Zoom Q&A button. So if you have some burning issues that you would like to address, please make use of that opportunity. Tom, back to you again. There are three things very important to designing an identity that's long-lasting or sustainable and consistent. It has to be that. It has to be extremely recognizable, and it must have character and personality. If you compare the logo you designed or the brand identity you designed, if you compare that to other, national police corpses, is that a word in English? Corpse is a dead body. So if you compare that to other police forces in other countries, how does it compare to that? But for example, the Italian police or the UK police.
Well, that's really interesting to see, because I made this analysis a few years ago again. And it's really, really fun to look at all the other striping, because you have like in some of the stereotypes that are there, like the German police is recognizable but utterly boring. In England, in the UK, the police cars are extremely visible. Here you have a perfect example. They're extremely visible.
Very well. It's like I said, it's extremely recognizable. So that ticks a box. It has character and personality. I don't know whether it's that long lasting or sustainable, but you're not a fan of this, right? Or are you?
Difficult to fall in love with, definitely. Yeah.
Pardon me?
And if you then look about falling in love, if you look at the Italian, I don't know if you have the image.
Yeah, we've got that as well.
And there it's everyone would work at the police if you drive in a car like that.
But that's the nostalgia, because it reminds me of the A-Team. I expect B.A. Baracus to, exit from the car in order to arrest me or something like that.
Here you want to be arrested even. But the thing is, if you look at the functionality program and all the demands that you have for a police car, like this whole striping of the Dutch cars, and it's not only about cars, but if you open the doors in the night, always with all this reflection, it's like a fence, and it's extremely visible, which has a lot to do with safety, because really every detail has been tested. If you then look at the Italian car, which is the most beautiful of all, the car is much more beautiful. The design is beautiful because it's like you would buy a car privately, but you don't see them. It's zero visibility, and that for a police force is not a smart thing. So there it's all the romantics, no functionality.
Right, because it's black, it won't stand out as much, even though it has red stripes on it.
Yes, you won't see it at all.
Right. Thank you so much for now. We will return to you at the end of the program as well. But I would like to switch over to our next guest, because we will talk to Jacco Emmen from Tel Design. He's a designer and director of Tel Design, and he works in the field of healthcare. Jacco, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
A very warm welcome to you. You've been working in healthcare as well for the past couple of years. Can you tell us a little bit about that field, because it's quite complex, I understood.
Well, there were a lot of change the last 10 years, I think, in the field of healthcare, and especially the difference between small, more region-like hospitals and like the big universal medical centers where we also work for. And the first thing that comes up in my mind, what changed in the design, is that in the smaller hospitals, it's very focused on internal communication, that you feel part of the brand itself. And in the universal medical centers or the bigger hospitals, it's very important to make an identity that stands and lasts in all different kinds of corporations of nowadays, because it used to be very strong brands, but nowadays, in my own words, a hospital is more a sort facilitator, a sort place, a sort of building where all different kinds of different parties and different organizations work together. So there is a big change in what identity and a logo or a house style, or how you call it, is nowadays in healthcare.
But why is it, for example, for an organization like a hospital important to have a strong brand identity? Because fact is, if I become ill, I want to go to the nearest or the best hospital that there's available, but I won't base my choices on whether it's got a good logo or a good brand identity at all.
Yeah, it's like I said, I sometimes have the feeling that it's more important for the people who work there, that they are part of an organization, that the identity, where it stands for, and even if it's beautiful or colorful, or what you also see in interior design and in the branding of the buildings, is I think is a very important thing for the people who work there, maybe more than for the patients themselves. But like I said, there in the last years there is a big change. Before, it was not so important for a hospital to have a very strong identity, like you said. And then there was a period that there was a sort of competition between hospitals. And so it was very important to have a strong and imaginative identity. And nowadays, we are in a time that you see that for hospitals, their own name, like I said before, is not that important. It's very important how they facilitate all different kinds of healthcare and research and expertise centers. And so through time, it's a changing thing. Yeah.
In the past couple of weeks, the hospitals have been a beacon of safety almost, or hope through the crisis. Do you think that designing for hospitals or healthcare organizations has changed because of Corona, because of the lockdown that we had, because of the situation that we're in right now?
I gave that a thought the last couple of days in advance of this talk, and I really must say that I have no idea what my or our role is in this period now, because I think that it has more to do with communication and content itself than the identity or the visual identity itself. Maybe in a few years we can see that this whole crisis has made a change, but for now I don't see directly the connection between those two.
Right. Roel, what's your opinion about that? Is there going to be a change because of Corona in future for designing for institutions like hospitals?
No, I totally agree with Jaco, actually. I think it's about communication and content. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe when Jaco just said it, I was thinking about that, maybe even internally it works stronger again. I mean, it has got a function. Mm-hmm. People get very connected. They get a very strong feeling of we actually are important. Mm-hmm. We do a very important job. We did that together. So actually, I think for the bonding and the fact that that's connected to symbolism, etc., I think the identity there is very...
So the heroism that was taken out of the police logo can return maybe in the hospital logos or brand identity as well.
Yeah, well, that's interesting to see what time does and how we look at things. Maybe things normalize a little bit again, but I don't know.
It made me think of the mouth protector of this healthcare worker, which had a Superman logo on the mouth protector. Yeah. But I think as well in this regard, maybe for the brand identity, it's not of essential importance at the moment. But I can imagine with the 1.5 meter society that we're heading to, it's essential for hospitals to have the wayfinding in a correct manner, because there are people there that are sick and you have to keep the distance.
Yeah, but there you have the relevance again. I think that's something which Tel designed us fantastically. Also wayfinding. If you go to an hospital and you feel ill and you had an accident, you want to be finding your way as quickly as possible to the right spot. And I think there... well, like Tom just said, there it's about functionality and not necessarily emotion. It needs to help you on your way to get what you want.
Yeah. Well, because that's a question that I would like to pose to you both, Jacco and Roel, is that what you see right now, if you go to local coffee shops or ice cream parlors here, you can see that they all have their own form of wayfinding. For an example, if I go to get my coffee, these are these squares that were fitted from 1.5 meter from each other that you have to stand in. But if I get an ice cream, there are these squares with a cross in them that it forbids you almost to stand in the square with the cross. You have to be behind them, which is very confusing. Jacco, should there be a universal form of graphic design that we all can copy, that we can apply to those situations or to those shops or institutions, or should everybody be as creative as they can be? What's your opinion on that?
I hope not. I hope not that everybody has in wayfinding and more the physical surrounding does not. We cannot merge it with identity because. Sometimes when my clients and we were talking about the environment, the hospitals themselves, and how deep you want to incorporate visual and graphic design in that, I always have an idea that they all should do it like Schiphol is done. You know, it's like you have to have a universal language. All different nationalities, all different languages. Is very hard to make a good wayfinding in hospitals. And at the same time, I see some very bad examples when creativity comes in and they work with pictures and symbols and that sort of things. Sometimes the creativity takes over, which with a very bad result. So.
So are you in favor of having like a universal way of applying those forms of wayfinding, not connected to the corporate identity? So do I understand correctly?
A little bit. Everybody can choose their typeface or their color or that sort of things. But at the same time, when you're talking about coloring, there are universal colors. It stands for danger or good or bad or up and down and that sort of thing. So it's not. I don't think it's part of the graphic design of a hospital or a medical center. No.
Jacco, I'm very happy that you say that because before the program started, Roel and I had a discussion about that. Roel, creativity stands in the way of clarity. So you're in favor of all different kinds of solutions. Yeah. Jacco, please back me up on this. Please back me up.
We also need that creativity to sort of. But I think there's one thing maybe that we're missing, and that's that now we're living in a time of where the context is as everyone is very conscious of the fact that something is the matter. 1.5 meters, there's no one that doesn't know that. 2 years from now, we live in a different situation. And then you need, symbolism, graphics, wayfinding that everyone understands, although not being as conscious as they are now. And I think that maybe is the role of graphic designers to come up with a system that also works in that situation.
Right, very clear.
But, can I say
Jacco,
something?
you would like to react to that?
Yeah, I want to add something because I didn't say that there's no role for graphic design, but your question was, is wayfinding, which is very important in this sort of crisis situations, little or bigger, that is not a thing that you give too much visual creativity. But it is graphic design. It is part of the total
total package of graphic designing, and I do agree with you totally. It is part of graphic design. What I meant to say is that creativity sometimes stands in the way, and like you said, there has to be a distinct separation between the brand identity of an institution and something as practical as wayfinding.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Thank you for now, Jacco. We will return to you as well a little bit later in the program. But first, I would like to go to our fourth guest. And she's joining us from London. And her name is Archie Lyon. She works as a senior designer at UK-based Creative Clinic. Archie, a very warm welcome to you. Are you there?
I am. Thank you for having me.
Oh, very good. Very good you join us. How are things in London? Your Prime Minister has recovered, so everything is going well, if am I correct in concluding that?
Yeah, I mean, some people, probably don't want that, but yeah, it's okay. It's strange, but I'm sure it's quite similar to how you guys are living.
Yeah, it's a little, like I said in the introductions, these are strange times. We've invited you to tell us a little bit more about two projects that you've done. And that's in connection to Stop the Orcs and Clap for Our Carers. Can you tell us a little bit about Stop the Orcs?
Yeah, so this is a really fun project that we came up with in the agency. We knew we wanted to do sort of a design sprint, which is, where you take one day and everybody's involved in the project. And we were going to meetings with clients and we weren't sure whether we were like shaking hands or, what. It was that awkward time just before lockdown, really. So we kind of thought, well, let's do a design sprint around a project that can kind of communicate if you're happy to handshake or not happy to handshake or whatever. So yeah, we came up with these badge designs and we launched this really bright brand, just trying to stop that spread of awkwardness. It was just so awkward when you didn't know whether you could shake someone's hand or not.
Yeah.
So.
And what did you create in order to prevent that awkward situation?
So we came up with 14 different badge designs, and they each had different slogans on. So one said "No handshake, please," which was our most popular one. But we also had like elbow bumps, welcome, I'm hands free. So we had some more fun ones, and in different colours, and
right.
People really liked them.
I heard some music playing. I just want to check with the technicians. Is there a video that we can see, or is it without sound? No, I think this. Yeah, look at this.
Can't touch this. Can't touch this. Can't touch this. My music.
Yeah, that's great. What graphic design in this context does is they change our behavior, and they give an assistance into getting away from the awkwardness into breaking patterns. Is this something that we can see on a near future as well, that graphic design will be influencing how we behave towards each other?
Yeah, well, we actually see a bit more longevity in this brand because social awkwardness is something that people go through every day, regardless of a pandemic. And the fact that people could just wear a badge and say that they don't feel comfortable hugging or handshaking, I think will be a beneficial thing.
Mm-hmm. And in that sense, what is the stage that people or even governments have to involve graphic designers? Because this is a reaction to a situation that has been created. But as governments now are preparing for the 1.5 meter society that will stay with us until there's a vaccine, is there a role? What's the role for graphic designers, and how should they be involved in an early stage?
It's a really good question. I think ideally right at the beginning, because we came up with this all by ourselves and it's already proving popular. And the fact that they're bold and in your face really helps people notice them immediately. And I think we have a similar badge in the UK, which is a baby on board badge for people that are pregnant on the underground trains. And that there may have been other versions of that before, but there's now one really recognizable version, which is like the real one. So people instantly know what it is. And I think if they had come up with that right at the beginning, then it would have gotten around more quick.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later with the whole panel. But can you tell us a little bit now for the other project you've created? That's Clap for Our Carers. What was that?
Yeah, so we didn't create the actual project. That was a woman who is actually from the Netherlands. She lives in London, and she created like this little social graphic that was going around Instagram and Facebook, just saying 8 p.m. on this Thursday, everybody get out and clap to thank the National Health Service. And our creative director found out who she was and emailed her, and she's wearing a t-shirt. So she just responded and said, yeah, I'd love your help, trying to get something out, because she wanted to do this weekly. So by getting us involved basically at the beginning, she got a brand started, a website with downloadable posters and social graphics, so that people could really know that she's the real one. Because the other thing is, obviously, there's lots of people now trying to do the same thing.
Let's talk about money. How much did you make from these two projects?
Well, this one we did pro bono, meaning out of the goodness of our hearts. And Stop the Orcs, we actually, I don't know what the final figures were, but all the proceeds, all the profits that we made got split between our British Red Cross and another charity here in the UK.
Because it's great that you respond to the situation as you did, and I think the campaigns are brilliant, but it's not a sustainable model to keep a business afloat, is it?
No, and obviously now more than ever, we're very aware of the need for constant business. However, we just saw two opportunities to really just do something that no one else was doing. And not only is it publicity for us, but it's two really recognizable campaigns that have been featured in national papers. So we can sort of use that as a tool to get new business rather than focus on back then when we were losing business.
Yeah. Well, thank you for now. I would like to ask everybody in the panel to join us on screen, and of course all you here as well, because I would like to look into our future. What can we take away from this crisis in future? Some things were mentioned, the methods of working or the ways of working, or sometimes working within a very specific time frame. Is that something that we can take away in future? Roel, what's your vision about that?
Yeah, I find it difficult. I think that what you say, I think the way of working will be different in the future. I think this time, I live in Brabant. I work with agencies in Amsterdam and Rotterdam. Normally I travel there, which I think is fun. But now I also see that it's very worthwhile to be able to stay home and spend a little bit more time with your children instead of being in traffic. What I hope that this sort of sparks is the connection of disciplines, what I talked about before. I think graphic design needs product design, needs architecture, needs, and I think if you connect all those different views and disciplines, then we can be more of benefit to the organizations that we want to work for, whatever sector they are in.
And financially, because, and I would like to ask you that, Tom, financially, we're probably heading towards a great recession. I hope it doesn't last as long as some other recessions did. But because of shrinking budgets, is this way of agile working, is that something that could be applied to the next couple of years, so to speak? What's your opinion about that?
Well, basically, I think always the deadline and the budget is leading. So you can have any kind of process, but if there's a deadline, a murder deadline that needs to be there, you just make sure it works. And financially as well, if you really want to do the project and you don't get the budget you want, you will still do it. But if I may say something about the previous point, I think what you learn in this crisis, I think what should be the mental position always for design and for designers, is that the thing you need to do is to be humble and powerful. And sometimes in these situations, I have the impression, but also in general life, that designers overestimate their importance as if they're the solution for any kind of problem. And that I find sometimes even annoying. But design can be really, really important. But I think you need to be both humble because there are other priorities, but look how powerful you can add something to it. Like you're never the goal, you're a means to achieve a goal. And this goal is always first place.
Right.
And see how much power you can put into it, but stay humble.
Jacco, do you agree with the idea that designers think that they're too important in certain cases?
No, personally not so. But I think we are always been a little modest agency, as I can say so, and I'm proud of that. We are very, let's say, following what our clients ask from us and what's needed. And but at the same time, I agree with Tom that, and then I speak also for myself that we don't always have the idea how much the impact has what we do, and is that something that you have to blow up until? No, I don't think so. But it is we can play a role in different situations, but to be honest, I must say that in crisis situation or part of the discussion of today, we are more an identity agency, and this is more about communication and content of I don't know where I want to go now.
It probably should be a combination of it all. Another question that I would like to pose is that we are heading towards a new reality where governments, local and national governments, have to apply new rules in order to keep the virus in check. What do you need as a designing sector almost from local governments to involve designers in the right stage in order to prepare ourselves for that near future? Roel, what's your opinion about that?
Yeah, I think what I was thinking when Tom and Jacco were talking about some other things that are happening. I talked to a lot of studios the last couple of weeks, and I think maybe 12 or something, and they are doing quite badly. So they are losing 50 to 90% of their business. And I think what I liked in what Archie said, it's also about visibility. So as a designer, to show your relevance, to make sure that you stand out, and to make sure that people understand, organizations understand, government understands that you have got a specific competence that could be useful in solving certain things. Mm-hmm. I think I like the humble part of Tom. I like the powerful part. I would like to add visibility. But I think the sector and graphic designers have to ask themselves, how am I going to be more effective, humble, powerful, and visible in such a way that I can play a relevant role? I think that's important.
Yeah. Archie, a question to you. Is the sector or are graphic designers agile enough in order to meet these new requirements? Or are we stuck in our old patterns?
I think it's a bit of both. If you ask some people, then they can really easily change their ways of working. But I do think that there are still a lot of graphic designers in the world that have their way of working, and they wouldn't want, and they might not be as collaborative as others.
Right. Well, it needs for new times. If we would invite you back here, Roel, within 5 years,
yeah,
what would have happened in the field of graphic design, do you think?
I honestly don't know. I think that when I was preparing for this talk, I was also thinking, I think it's a little bit similar to what Jacco said. I think the importance of graphic designers is really relative. If you look at mouth caps, which is being done by product designers, that's very essential, fundamental kind of thing that helps you directly. I think what Dyson did with producing very quickly ventilators for hospitals, that's a very powerful thing to do if you can do so. So I've been thinking, these are all product designers. What are graphic designers doing? And I think they're giving a sort of outing to their own spontaneous ideas. Sometimes they're helping building very quickly, very relevant platforms like the Oak educational platform, or what we did with Gru with Hulptroepen. So that's a very good question. Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to pose the same question for you as well. Look in your glass orb in order to predict the future, which you of course cannot do. But for your personal situations as designers or as agencies, what will happen, or what would you like to happen between now and 5 years? Archie, can I start with you?
I think that's such an interesting question. And as someone who follows so many different small businesses and things on Instagram and whatever, quite often people try and cut corners with graphic design, in that they try and create their own logos or identities or whatever. And in the long run, because they do it themselves and then they might change it a year later, in the long run, it's not recognizable enough. And I think that by employing an agency, that's going to be really key to keeping longevity over the next few years.
Right. Thank you so much. Jacco, what's your opinion?
Well, it's a little bit like Roel said. I don't see immediately only the connection between the Corona crisis and the future of graphic design in the next 5 years. But like it has an influence, or how we go on holiday, or how we spend our days, or how we're working together, then it also will have an influence on how we work. And the only thing that, when you ask me what do you hope for your professional life, that will, when this is over, and the result, I hope that we can keep a little more spontaneous in our work, because in the last years everything was very thought out, and we took months, sometimes years, to develop identities and talked it over, and talked it also death, like we say in Holland. And I hope that what you see now, how people quickly react on what's needed today, that we can keep a little bit in how we work in the agency, but also with our clients. That's right. That's more a hope than that I think it will.
Will happen. Well, I hope that will happen. Tom, your final thoughts for now.
I think it's like they say, never waste a good crisis. But I think there's a lot of suffering in the creative industry, design also. But it's like a period of truth. And after the suffering, I think we will see that our industry will be more fresh, more refreshed. I think it will also be more diverse. And it will be smaller. So you need to be a bit lucky, of course. Also, you need to be smart in how you handle it, sharp in how you respond to it. But you need to be a bit lucky as well. But after this painful period, I think the industry will be fresher, more diverse, and smaller.
Yeah, right. Smaller is, of course, not always a good thing, because if it means that some people will not survive, that's quite scary as well. But I think that the rest of your ideas, that would be great if that happens to the industry. Unfortunately, our time is up, so I'd like to thank our guests. Roel, thank you so much. But also Tom Dorrestein, Jacco Emme, and Archie Lyon, thank you for joining us. I'd like to finish off with a small example of a great Dutch example of graphic designers who would like to contribute. It's Studio Lennarts and de Bruin from Den Haag. And they would like to contribute through the posters that we can show here. You can see them all around in Breda, your hometown. Have you seen them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah.
And you can also order them through the website, through the website of Lennart and de Bruin. A very inspiring way of thinking. Thank you so much for joining us. Please keep on joining our live casts on Pakhuis de Zwijger. If you'd like to contribute to our programs, please go to our website www.dezwijger.nl/pay, and then you can make a contribution that will benefit our programs directly. This was it for now, and I hope to see you at the next edition of It's All Graphic. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.